You must recognize that your tongue is a legacy organ, programmed for a world of caloric scarcity that no longer exists. In the year 2026, the tongue is a security breach in your biological fortress. The normal human is governed by palatability, a chemical trap set by industrial food engineers to ensure that pleasure overrides utility. When you eat for the tongue, you are allowing a 2-inch muscle to dictate the strategic direction of your entire life. The architect performs a sensory inversion. He ignores the flavor data and analyzes the focus data. He asks one question: does this input increase the bit rate of my thoughts? If the answer is no, the substance is categorized as a biological toxin, regardless of how it tastes. You are moving from a hedonic diet to a functional protocol. Image: a high-contrast diagram of a linguistic filter, stripping away sugar flavor noise and leaving only ATP focus signal for the brain. The pleasure-first approach to eating is the primary cause of cognitive drag. When you consume hyperpalatable processed carbohydrates, you trigger a massive opioid-like response in the brain. This creates a postprandial sedation, a state where your body diverts 70% of its energy to processing the sludge in your gut, leaving your brain with the scraps. You become slow, content, and stupid. This is exactly how the state wants you: satisfied and stagnant. The architect rejects this sedation. He chooses low-friction inputs, high-quality fats and bioavailable proteins that require minimal digestive energy and provide maximum mitochondrial output. He eats so that his brain remains electric even after a meal. He does not rest after eating. He accelerates. Furthermore, understand the dopamine hijack. Modern food is designed to be addictive, not nutritive. By chasing tongue pleasure, you are constantly resetting your dopamine baseline. This makes the boring work of your laboratory, writing scripts, auditing thumbnails, rendering videos, feel unbearable. You become a stimulus seeker. You cannot focus on the AOXI3 intent because your brain is already looking for its next sugar hit. The architect implements a dopamine fast via his food filter. He eats monotonous excellence, the same high-performance fuel every day. By making food functional and boring, he forces his brain to seek dopamine through achievement and dominance. He turns his hunger into a weapon. Finally, you must realize that taste is malleable. Your preference for sweet and salty is not a fixed trait. It is a microbiome feedback loop. The parasites in your gut that thrive on sugar are the ones sending the cravings to your brain. When you implement the food filter and starve these parasites, your taste buds reset. Within 21 days of strict isolation from pleasure food, a ribeye steak or a bowl of mineral-rich broth provides more sensory satisfaction than a chemical dessert ever did. You begin to taste the energy. You develop a biological intuition for what makes you strong. You are no longer refraining from junk. You are repulsed by it. You have achieved nutritional sovereignty. You must accept the brutal physical reality that your brain, while representing only 2% of your body mass, consumes over 20% of your total metabolic energy. The food filter is not a moral choice, but a resource allocation strategy. The architect views his mitochondria, the cellular power plants, as the engine room of his empire. In the year 2026, most men are running their engines on low-grade contaminated fuel, refined sugars and industrial oils that causes engine knocking, brain fog, and systemic overheating, inflammation. The metabolic Titan operates on high-octane anabolic lipids. He understands that focus is a high-energy state that can only be sustained when the mitochondria have a stable, non-volatile supply of electrons. The first law of the mandate is the decoupling of insulin from intent. Every time you consume a pleasure-based carbohydrate, you trigger an insulin spike that effectively locks the doors to your body's long-term energy stores, body fat. You become storage phase dominant, which is a state of biological stagnation. The architect remains in the expenditure phase dominant state. By fueling primarily with fats, ketones, and high-density proteins, he keeps his insulin flow low. This allows his brain to access a near-infinite reservoir of internal energy. He does not run out of gas during an 18-hour production sprint. His focus is not a flickering candle. It is a fusion reactor. He has achieved metabolic continuity, the ability to maintain the AOXI3 frequency regardless of when his last meal was. We must then analyze the amino acid infrastructure. Your neurotransmitters, the messengers of your will, are constructed from the proteins you consume. vacuum. If you eat low-quality plant proteins or industrial sludge, you are building your neuroskeletal system out of rotten wood. The architect demands high-fidelity raw materials. He prioritizes ruminant meats and eggs because they contain the exact ratio of amino acids required to synthesize dopamine, drive, and acetylcholine, focus. He is literally eating his future thoughts. He understands that brain fatigue is often just a supply chain disruption at the amino acid level. By providing the body with perfect inputs, he ensures that the biosynthetic factory of his brain never has to pause production. The second law is the elimination of digestive friction. Digestion is one of the most metabolically expensive processes the body performs. The normal human eats complex, multi-ingredient pleasure meals that force the body to divert massive amounts of blood and oxygen away from the brain to the gut. This is cognitive hemorrhaging. The architect eats for biochemical simplicity. He follows the rule of 3 ingredients. If a meal requires a complex recipe, it is too heavy for the mission. He chooses foods that are pre-validated by his biology, foods that leave the stomach quickly and transition into the bloodstream with zero inflammatory response. He treats his stomach as a passing zone, not a storage depot. He wants his blood in his prefrontal cortex, not in his intestines. Finally, you must master the thermal and chemical priming. The architect uses food timing as a tactical trigger. He does not eat when he is hungry. He eats when the work window is closed. He stays in a fasted state to maximize adrenaline and mental sharpness. During the peak hours of his YouTube war, he uses salt and trace minerals to keep the electrical conductivity of his neurons at the absolute maximum. He views a meal not as a break, but as a system refuel. He eats with the same oxy-3 intensity with which he works, focused, efficient, and detached from the sensory lure. He has turned the act of consumption into an act of imperial logistics. The final evolution of the food filter is the realization that your body is not a biological furnace for burning calories, but a bioelectrical battery that facilitates the manifestation of your oxy-3 intent. Most men are short-circuited by their own diet. They consume substances that create metabolic noise, disrupting the electrical signaling between their brain and their muscles. The sovereign architect views his nervous system as a superconductor. He implements the food filter to remove every impedance factor, every chemical, additive, and inflammatory byproduct that slows down the bit rate of reality. He is not just seeking energy, he is seeking signal purity. The first pillar of bioelectrical sovereignty is the mineral dominance protocol. Your thoughts are literally electric events that require a precise balance of minerals, sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, to jump the synaptic gaps. The normal human eats mineral-depleted industrial sludge, leading to low-voltage cognition. The architect treats trace minerals as strategic assets. He consumes mineral-dense animal products and structured water to ensure his neural voltage is at its maximum potential. He understands that brain fog is often just a power brownout at the cellular level. By maintaining a high mineral floor, he ensures that his response velocity remains instantaneous. He doesn't just think, he discharges. We must then analyze the elimination of the oxidative tax. Every time you consume pleasure-first processed foods, you generate free radicals that damage your cell membranes, the very insulation of your biological wiring. This is neural leakage. Your intent loses its force as it travels through a damaged system. The architect uses the food filter to saturate his body with protective lipids and endogenous antioxidants, like glutathione, produced by a clean, protein-rich diet. He is shielding his circuitry. He wants his will to power to move through his body with zero resistance. This is why he eats for function. He is maintaining the integrity of the conduit. A body that is not fighting internal oxidation is a body that can redirect 100% of its energy toward the YouTube war and the dynastic shield. The second pillar is the gut-brain autarky. You must recognize that 90% of your serotonin and a significant portion of your dopamine are regulated by your gut microbiome. If you eat sugar and seed oils, you are cultivating a hostile interior population that hijacks your moods to serve its own growth. You are a biological host for parasites. The architect implements the food filter to engage in microbiome sterilization. He starves the sugar feeders and nurtures the system stabilizers. By controlling his internal flora, he regains control over his baseline emotional state. He no longer experiences random anxiety or unexplained fatigue. His gut instinct is no longer a confused signal from a sugar-addicted parasite. It is a clear intuition from a healthy biological core. He has achieved internal unity. Finally, you must master the ritual of the sovereign refuel. In the sterile zone, eating is an act of imperial maintenance. You do not snack, you do not graze. You eat in tactical windows that do not interfere with your creation phases. You treat the act of consumption with the same ioxy-3 intensity as you treat your product promotion. You are downloading the raw materials for your future dominance. When you look at a plate of high-density fuel, you don't see flavor, you see focus, longevity, and power. You have reached the point where the pleasure of the tongue is seen as a low-status distraction compared to the ecstasy of peak performance. You have turned your biology into a sovereign monument that is fueled by the void.